Mortal Kombat has been around for nearly 35 years, and with such a long-spanning franchise, there are gonna be some low points. Hell, you can argue we're in one right now. But I don't think we're anywhere close to the worst time in the series' history, cause that would have to go to 1997. Hello my fellow oddities, and welcome to my breakdown of the worst year in Mortal Kombat history, where we had such back-to-back bangers as Mortal Kombat Mythologies, Mortal Kombat 4, Mortal Kombat Annihilation. Woo! Today, I'm going to go through each of these properties and explain exactly what went wrong, whether it was behind the scenes drama or just straight up incompetence. So let's dive right into the beginning of the worst year in Mortal Kombat history, which is actually at the end, because on October 1st of 1997, Mortal Kombat Mythologies Sub-Zero was released. MK Mythologies was a platformer spin-off game following the GOAT of the franchise, Bi-Han aka Sub-Zero. This was originally planned to be the beginning of a spin-off franchise for MK, Mythologies, which would follow the stories of many great characters, Jax and Sonya, Baraka, Kung Lao. Some of these games would eventually come to be in some form or another, Special Forces, Shaolin Monks, but overall the Mythology series was scrapped. Reminds me of the whole X-Men Origins debacle. Not a great sign. Sub-Zero was chosen as the first for this series because of his mysterious background with the Lin Kuei, left a lot of room to be explored, and that's exactly what they did. Many of the intricacies of the Lin Kuei that have now become common knowledge originated from this game. Most of the origin story stuff though was left to bios, as the main game would tell the story of Sub-Zero right before the 1992 tournament. This would also set up MK4, which was being developed at the same time and included a lot of the same characters and story elements as this game. At the beginning of the game, Sub-Zero is sent on a mission to a Shaolin temple to take the Map of Elements, which leads to the Temple of Elements. He fights through some monks before meeting Scorpion, or at this point he's Hanzo Asashi. He beats him and, if you choose to do so, which is the canon progression so you should, kills Hanzo, leaving with the map. It's revealed then that Quan Chi was the one who hired the Lin Kuei for this task. He also hired Hanzo to do the same thing, but because he failed and Bi-Han succeeded, he rewards the Lin Kuei by massacring their rival clan of the Shirai Ryu, the one Hanzo belonged to. Bi-Han is then sent to the Temple of Elements itself to defeat the 4 elemental gods, including the wind god Fujin, and take the amulet of Shinnok. He is successful, but when Quan Chi takes the amulet from him, Raiden appears and commands Sub-Zero to travel to the Netherrealm and take it back. As it turns out, Shinnok kinda wants to enslave all of Earth, which wouldn't be so good for the Lin Kuei. Bi-Han does exactly as Raiden asks, fighting the resurrected Scorpion and Sisterhood of Shadow along the way, where he meets Serena, who he spares. This would prove to be the right choice later on when she helps him defeat Quan Chi. However, Serena is killed by Shinnok and he battles Sub-Zero. Of course, Bi-Han isn't gonna beat a fallen Elder God in a hand-to-hand fight, so instead he takes the amulet and gets the hell out of there. This all sounds great, right? And they're told through, yes, silly, but also very entertaining live-action cutscenes, which gave us the legendary Richard DiVigio performance as Quan Chi. Yeah, the story in this game is actually pretty good. Where it faltered was the gameplay. This was the first completely original Mortal Kombat game to be released exclusively to home consoles. Yes, Trilogy wasn't released to arcades either, but that's more of an expansion to MK3 than an original title. This was an ambitious goal, mostly originating from co-creator John Tobias, to stretch their limits and test themselves with a brand new challenge to tackle, that if paid off, could expand the franchise's reach beyond what they thought possible, which was already in effect with several movies and TV shows in the works. But in their attempts to create something new, the issue was them being stuck in their old ways, because they wanted to create a platformer game that used the same controls as their fighting games, resulting in an infuriating mess. Traps that come out of nowhere, being forced to jump without knowing where you're going, terrible depth perception, enemies ambushing you the moment you step into a room. Even the combat, which you should expect to be the strong suit, doesn't work here. The special move inputs that work in a fighting game don't in a high-paced platformer where you go against multiple enemies at once. Most times, you'll find yourself using the simple down-forward low-punch ice ball move because it's the only one you can remember and use in split-second moments, though the game does force you to use the slide, which has a very wonky input for multiple boss fights. And because of the way MK's combat is set up, there needs to be a turn button in this game. A button to turn around. This is an insanely difficult game for all the wrong reasons. Which is a great shame, because the story is definitely worthwhile, and the concept of a Sub-Zero spin-off game sounds peak. So what went wrong here with all it had going for it? Well, what else would it be but time? Get the fuck out of here, Chronica! With two projects needing to release around the same time, this game had a strict deadline to coincide with MK4. Mythologies only had a mere 14 months, just over a year, to be developed. And reminder that this was the first home release platforming game that this team had worked on ever. It was a recipe for disaster that they, of course, tried their best to make something great out of, but the reality was, without the proper time, resources, and distribution of workload, this game would have needed a miracle to work out. And that ambition, without the necessities to develop it, is exactly why the game built alongside this one, MK4, was also a disappointment. MK4 was released October 15th, 1997, and of the three pieces of media we're talking about today, it is the best, maybe by far, as it is the traditional fighting game we all know and love. But as far as it comes to its stance in the rest of the series, it's down there with the worst MK games. So, MK was at its peak before this. The 1995 movie, UMK3, trilogy, business was booming. But those at Midway knew that MK couldn't falter to the past. Other games, including other fighting games, had made the jump to 3D, so it was time for Mortal Kombat to follow. And they also needed a new storyline, as the whole Shao Kahn shtick was getting old. So John Tobias, as always, helmed a new story for MK4, where Shinnok, with help from his second-in-command Quan Chi, created a plan to take over Edenia and eventually Earth. So the defenders of Earthrealm, Johnny Cage, Sonya, Jax, Liu Kang, and all the rest, they had to come together and stop the fallen Elder God. As he always had, Liu Kang would rise through the ranks, defeating all Shinnok's forces had to offer before getting to the fallen Elder God himself, and winning, reinforcing his position as pound for pound strongest MK character, at least at the time. However, with MK4, a lot of other characters were actually planned to be in the game. Kitana, Noob Saibot, Kano, but the team felt that the series couldn't continue to leech off of old ideas. This was a new beginning for the series, which needed new faces, so those characters would be replaced by people like Tanya, Reiko, Jarek, and characters from Mythologies such as Fujin were brought in as well. But these new characters were not up to the quality most had expected from this series. Many of them were one-dimensional repeats of caricatures we had already seen from the other characters. Let's take Jarek for example. The dude is a carbon copy of Kano, with all the personalities stripped away. He has the same moves, the same role as the Black Dragon rival to the Special Forces, but he's got no metal eye plate, yet can still shoot lasers somehow, no accent, no true connection to Jax or Sonya. The only thing he's known for is his ending, which is pretty good, I'll give it that. Even characters who eventually were expanded upon or became fan favorites were mediocre in MK4. Tanya, Reiko, even Fujin. And let's not even talk about the waste that is Kai. Poor dude, bring him back in some form, NRS. And that takes me to the main villain, Shinnok. He may not be the worst villain of the series, but man is he the most lame. And he was the first MK villain to have a serious aura debt. He was a playable character in the base MK4 and was the only character to have no special moves. He was the worst character in his own game, and his boss fight is an absolute breeze, easier than any other fight you'll have in the ladder. And with new characters being so important to defining a new Mortal Kombat game, especially the main villain, it wasn't looking so good for Mortal Kombat 4. Then we get to the gameplay itself. Firstly, even though Midway tried to get with the times, by the time MK4 came out as their first 3D game, its graphics were already outdated and outperformed by several other games at the time. And in the game itself, it didn't make proper use of the 3D environments. Sure, there was sidestepping, but other than that, it was the same 2D movement and fighting that had been done before and done more excitingly in their previous titles. Weapons were a big focus of the game's marketing, yet in-game they felt random, barely a factor. Usually you'd get 1 or 2 hits in before they're smacked out of your hand. And then the fatalities, of course what MK was famous for, but here the only thing they have going for them is that it's 3D! Many are recycled from previous games or just plain boring. Now, it's not all bad. Scorpion's storyline in MK4 is one of his most iconic and best, with him finding out about Quan Chi being the one to kill his clan and family. Amazing. Perfect. And a lot of the character endings had really good potential to develop into something great. MK Gold also brought in a lot of much needed returning faces. However, as an overall package, MK4 is likely the worst of the mainline MK games. Why? Well, you already heard the spiel about MK Mythologies, and it's largely the same factors here. Mortal Kombat 4 was their first 3D game with new mechanics, animated cutscenes, voice acting, yet it's only coming out a year after their last game. and they're developing a separate game at the same time. It's not fair at all to the developers, Ed Boon, John Tobias, and all the rest, having to develop all this new material for the first time with the amount of resources they had. At this point, the series' success had become its downfall, and everything was moving too fast in an effort to catch up to competitors who had kept moving rather than relishing in the popularity. So, after MK4, the series would have a long break. From games. Okay, from mainline games. And we ended up getting Deadly Alliance in 2002, a much more pure 3D experience which revamped the franchise for success going forward. But one more MK project would release in 1997, perhaps the worst of them all. Not a game, but a movie, the sequel to Mortal Kombat 1995, Mortal Kombat Annihilation. Annihilation was released November 21st, 1997. The first movie had been a smash hit in 1995, widely seen even to this day as one of the best video game movies, which was not a high bar, especially for 1995, but hey, it beat Street Fighter, and yes, history will repeat itself in 2026. After the success, a sequel was obvious, especially with how the last one ended, with Shao Kahn ready for invasion. However, the second movie would already be off to a bad start, with several crucial cast members leaving the project. The director, Paul W.S. Anderson, would not come back for Annihilation, and the movie would be directed by John R. Leonetti, who was the cinematographer for the first movie. And it was actually the disaster of Annihilation that made Paul W.S. Anderson never give up on the Resident Evil movies. Yeah, that wasn't exactly a good thing either. But perhaps most crucially, only 3 actors from the first movie returned in this one of which wasn't even playing the same character. Robin Shou came back as Liu Kang, Talisa Soto came back as Katana, and Keith Cook came back not as Reptile, but instead Kuai Liang. It's a little wish-washy for what reasons certain cast members left, but mostly it was down to the script. Which, yeah, valid. Christopher Lambert would be replaced by James Remar as Raiden, who by the way was great in the new Welcome to Derry series, which I loved. Sandra Hess would replace Bridget Wilson as Sonya, and Johnny Cage was played by Chris Conrad instead of Lyndon Ashby. Well, that didn't last long. Along with the returning cast being completely different, a plethora of new characters were introduced. Too many. Shao Kahn, Sindel, Jax, Cyrax, Smoke, Kuai Liang, Whitewash Jade, Nightwolf, Shinnok for some godforsaken reason, Rain, Ermac, Motaro, Shiva, Baraka, and there's probably more, but so many new characters who do barely anything and more often than not, die. And none of them are acted well either. Robin Shou is probably the only actor who gives in a good performance, and it's still a downgrade from 1995 where he was great. But Sindel, Jade, Shao Kahn have some horrendous performances. Even James Remar, who I just complimented earlier, is just so corny in this movie. And some people enjoy that aspect of Annihilation. I hate it. I think besides Shao Kahn, most of the performances aren't even bad enough to be fun, just boring.
Mother. You're alive. Too bad you will die.
Okay, I will admit that one is pretty funny. The story? I don't even know where to begin. The movie just doesn't make sense. It kinda adapts MK3 with Shao invading Earthrealm. Then all the heroes split up for some reason. Sonya meets with Jax and has a very necessary mud fight with Molina.
It was super necessary.
Liu and Katana are attacked by Smoke and Scorpion, but saved by Kuai Liang, but Katana is captured, and while this is happening, Raiden is giving up his mortality. Then Liu meets with Nightwolf, who tells him about 3 trials he has to go through to unlock his animality, so Liu meets with Jade, but then they just leave after the first trial and it's never mentioned again. Then they go rescue Katana, try to restore Sindel, but it turns out Jade is evil and it doesn't work. Raiden fights a bunch of reptiles for some reason, and then they fight Shao Kahn and his minions. Raiden dies, Liu Kang turns into a dragon and fights Shao Kahn, who turns into a Hydra, I think. Liu wins, and they all live happily ever after. This is literally a child playing with action figures, dude. That wasn't even a plot, just things happening. And don't even get me started on the CGI and effects. The first movie didn't have a great VFX, but holy crap, where did the budget go with this one? How much did this movie cost to make? Okay, what about the first movie? 10 million more. 10 million more than the first movie. Yeah, I know it's been almost 30 years, but can we launch an investigation into where that money went? So what went wrong here? Well, again, I think it all ties back to suffering from success. Well, I guess less suffering from success and more so just handling success with incompetence. A sequel to 1995 was fast-tracked, a movie that already had its flaws in several areas, let's admit, but was made up for by genuine care and love for the games. And I think you can tell with Annihilation that people did care, but they weren't given the sufficient time needed to implement it the way that they did last time around. Because they needed to get that script done, and the filming and the effects, all that technical stuff came first, and none of the passion. And of course, it's not helped by almost the entire cast leaving, which left us feeling disconnected to the characters we grew to love, and the director having this job of directing for the first time in his life. That's probably why this movie feels like such a commercial. It's just fights over and over again to stimulate our brains, bright and colorful but goofy costumes, and 10 times more corporate vibes than the first film. A Mortal Kombat 3 was planned and actually did get further into production than you'd think considering the disaster that was Annihilation, but ultimately, MK3, get it? It wouldn't come to be. Let's all hope that the next second movie in a live-action MK franchise is much better when Mortal Kombat 2 releases in theaters May 8th, 2026. Please be good, I'm begging you, my mental health relies on it. But that'll do it for today. Let me know in the comments down below whether you think 1997 is the worst year in Mortal Kombat history, or if there's another one that you think is worse. Subscribe and leave a like if you want, and that's wraps on this one, my fellow oddities. I'll see you next time.